Good evening, members, and welcome to the 44th Study Circle meeting of Borrowing Central Study Circle on yet another topic of Gift City, IFSC, this tax, regulatory, etc. etc. Before we start, let us raise for our institute motto.
य एष सुप्तेषु जाग्रति य एष सुप्तेषु जाग्रति कामं 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 कामपुरुषो पुरुषो निर्मिमाणः निर्मिमाणः तदेव शुक्रं तद्ब्रह्मा तद्ब्रह्मा तदेवामृतमुच्यते तस्मिन् लोकः शतः सर्वे तदूनात्यपि कश्चन एतद्द्वैता 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 एतद्द्वैता.
Thank you, friends. Before I hand over the further proceedings to Vijay sir, just two announcement. Today, due to some medical emergency, our one of the speakers, Siddharth Shah, will not be able to join. But on his behalf, from his office, Nesh Shah and Ishita Khare are joining today our session. And second thing, on Sunday 29th, we are having a physical meeting because from lots of members, we got a query that we should have a meeting from Registrar of Firms on the topic ROF. The Registrar ROF himself is coming to our seminar on 29th from 10 to 1. We have a seminar. So members are requested to take benefit of the same and join in large numbers. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a good day. Vijay sir, all yours, sir.
Welcome back, members. In today, we have three sessions. One is introduction to International Financial Service Center and Gift City. Then what are its tax and regulatory aspects? And what are the professional opportunities for as a chartered accountant we can get from these things. So first speaker will be Dipesh Shah, who will be taking through the introduction to IFSC and Gift City. I request our core committee member Jawad Basa to briefly introduce you.
Jawad, you are on mute.
Thank you, Vijay bhai. I welcome Mr. Dipesh Shah on behalf of BCSE. Mr. Dipesh Shah is the head of development of International Financial Service Center Authority. He has over 20 years of professional experience in international business, project development, corporate affairs, corporate law, and policy matters. His most prominent achievement includes setting up and operationalizing India's first smart city and international financial services center, IFSC. He presently heads the development and international relations at IFSCA. Mr. Shah is a Bachelor of Commerce and Chartered Secretary from Institute of Company Secretaries of India, ICSI, and Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators, UK, and has postgraduate diploma in business management, PGDM, MBA from Nirma University, India, with specialization in international business and finance. He is currently pursuing his doctoral program, PhD in International Financial Service Center, IFSC. With this brief introduction, I request CA Ravi Soni to present a memento to our first speaker of the session, Mr. Dipesh Shah. Thank you, Ravi. With this brief introduction, now I request Mr. Dipesh Shah to take over the charge of the session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, the team BCCS on inviting us to be part of this important deliberation that you are having for your members. And it's very important that professionals like chartered accountants understand the opportunities arising from India's first maiden international financial services center, which is housed in Gift City, Gujarat. I think before taking you with the some of the aspects of the IFFC authority, let me just briefly give you a background on the Gift City and how it has been developing into a financial and IT hub. The Gift City is a new concept in India in terms of setting up an international and domestic financial services zone. It has a component which is setting up a state-of-the-art world-class infrastructure for finance and IT companies to participate. This is a greenfield city which has been developed into a new financial and IT hub. It has a state-of-the-art infrastructure in forms of several infrastructure which has been delivered for the first time in India. In fact, the technology of drinking water from the tap is operational in this city for last 7 years now. In terms of the overall development of the Gift City, this is spread over 800 acres of land parcel. The master plan of the Gift City is spread across the commercial, residential, and social facilities. So everything is in a close proximity in terms of for people to work and live. It works on the concept of walk to work and has several components which is helping finance and IT companies to prosper. In terms of the International Financial Services Center Authority, this center, which is under which this operates, the Gift City, is called International Financial Services Center. And this center has been the new innovation in India that for all practical purpose, this center has been demarcated as an offshore center within India. So for the benefit of the members who are on this webinar today, you have for all practical purpose in India a zone which is declared as an offshore zone within India. And to add to that, the zone not only offshore zone, but it also has transactions in foreign currency. So anything that you do here can be transacted in any foreign currency apart from Indian rupees. So you can't transact your businesses in Indian rupees. This is meant for more foreign offshore transactions. How this is now been operationalized, the International Financial Services Center initially got operationalized with the existing domestic regulators, which were the RBI, SEBI, IRD, and PFRDA. And it got operationalized with the basic operating guidelines, which were more carved out from the domestic regulations. And now this whole city has got this International Financial Service Center has got a separate unified regulator. So in December 2019, Government of India, through an act of Parliament, has passed International Financial Services Centers Authority Act, which is for the first time creating a unified regulator in India, combining the powers of RBI, SEBI, IRD, and PFRDA into one regulator, which is IFFC authority. Now, most importantly, this authority now becomes for this zone as a single unified regulator. So all the approvals, regulations are all within the powers of this IFFC authority, which is a unique way of operating an international financial services from an Indian perspective, because we are used to multiple regulators, multiple regulations, and the processes, which at times becomes quite cumbersome for the entities to operate in a unified way. So from the Government of India perspective, I think this is a unique initiative of the Government of India to have an IFFC, and with an IFFC authority being a unified regulator. On 1st October 2020, we got the powers of all the domestic regulators vested for the international zone in the IFFC authority. So now for banking, insurance, capital market, and PFRDA, you have only one unified regulator for this zone. As on date, this zone has already housed 200 plus financial services entities, and they are licensed in various segments for close to 19 banks, including 5 foreign banks are licensed here. This includes foreign banks like Standard Chartered, HSBC, Barclays, Deutsche Bank, and Citibank. We also have all the Indian banks, ICICI, SDFC, Axis Bank, and various other banks, which are operating their offshore branches here. So when they open a branch here, for all practical purpose for them, it becomes a non-resident branch or an offshore branch from an India perspective. And under the FEMA also, we are recognized as an offshore territory within India. And thereby all the transactions that you carry out from here becomes a dollar denominated or a foreign currency oriented. Apart from banks, we have insurance companies, we have capital market where we have two international exchanges, one led by BSE called India INX, another led by NSE called NSE IFFC. And we have quite a substantial number of broking firms which are operating here. To add to that, we are also having several other entities like global in-house centers. We have entities in aircraft leasing and financing, and a quite substantial amount of new business activities are being added. So from a chartered accountant perspective, I would say that you have a unique position now that in India, you have a unified regulator, you have financial services zone, which primarily from a chartered accountant perspective, I think this is the area which is their expertise. And we have seen now also we have come out with a framework called ancillary framework, which is for more professional services firms to come in. In fact, we have now got a chartered accountancy firm licensed in the IFFC as a first firm. We have a substantial number of other professional firms like consultancy firm, law firms, which are part of the ecosystem. We have administrators, we have trustee companies, asset management companies are all part of the professional firms. What is important for you as a chartered accountants is to recognize that you now have a new areas of practice available for you. You can become one of the important service provider in the IFFC zone. The banks, for example, have already transacted more than $100 billion transactions from the IFFC zone. And when they are transacting in the overseas markets or for providing external commercial borrowing, ECB for the clients, normally they will need services of a professional firms. And I think your services will become very important of being housed in the IFFC zone. Apart from this, we are taking several initiatives, like we are bringing in US stock trading on the IFFC exchanges here. The Indian residents, which is under the LRS, would be able to buy global stock under the depository receipt mechanism in the IFFC exchanges itself. We have taken steps to introduce a new line of businesses. We have introduced aircraft leasing and financing for the first time in India. Already licensed 5 entities and close to 15 companies are in advanced stage of their incorporating aircraft leasing entities in IFFC, which is a substantial shift from the earlier that these activities were all done from Ireland, Singapore, Dubai, and other financial centers. So one of the objectives of the government of India for the IFFC is to how do I onshore the activities which were offshore. And that's where we believe, I think this can be a significant contributor to the global financial services that the India currently has been importing from other global financial centers. It's important to recognize the fact that this zone is enabling several capital market transactions on the funds to come in. We already licensed quite a substantial number of funds and various funds are in advanced stage of setting up. Here also, I would urge to your members to look in closer to the opportunity for the fund industry. They are setting up funds, they are setting up manager entity, they're setting up sponsored entities, and you can be a service providers to all of these entities, which is getting set up here. You will also happy to note that for the first time, this Global Financial Services Center has been recognized as one of the fastest emerging global financial center globally, and is rated number 1 top of the chart out of the 15 global centers, where in next 2 years, it is suggested that this will be a significant contributor to the global financial services business. Apart from this, we are setting up and operationalizing India's first international bullion exchange, which is for the first time a spot exchange getting operationalized here. Now, this is unique because in India, we don't have a spot bullion exchange. And the first time the pilot run has already been done. And on the 1st October, we are anticipating this exchange to go live, which will again throw up opportunities for new line of businesses for the broking, the bullion participants to trade in the IFFC environment. Apart from this, we are also taking initiatives on the fintech side. We are becoming an emerging fintechs hub for the fintech companies to come in. And we are also providing a lot of new business opportunities for several initiatives which were earlier not happening in India. For example, we used to avail the ECB from foreign banks for the Indian companies. So now the ECB lending is all coming onshore. The banks in IFFC is providing ECB to the Indian clients. For trade finance, this is becoming an important financial hub. Even INR USD trading has been enabled. The NDF OTC is also been crossed $110 billion in the IFFC zone in last 11 months. So if you see from an overall professional perspective, I would urge you that closer home, this is more like having your branch in DIFC Dubai or having your branch in Singapore. It provides you a similar advantage. So when you open say for example, your consultancy or a chartered accountancy from here, you will not be able to serve the entities from India who wants to set up in IFFC. You can actually serve global clients who wants to set up in IFFC, or even for their global business sitting here, you can serve them. The zone also provides almost a 10-year tax holiday out of 15. That is a 10-year tax holiday. You can choose any 10-year 100% tax exemption. There's no GST for the export of services, and thereby making it a very, very competitive and compelling reason for professional firms to operate from. The International Financial Services Center is an important, from a regulator's perspective, we are trying to bring in all the enablers which helps the various several businesses to prosper. For example, recently we came out with two very important frameworks. One is on the global regional treasury centers can be set up in the IFFC zone now under the framework issued by the IFFC authority. And we also issued a framework for ITFS, International Trade Financial Services System, can be set up here for cross-border transactions. And this is a unique platform where you can provide the services for exporter and importers on a platform here. And this makes us quite forward-looking type of an approach towards the business on international financial services centers that we are trying to develop in this zone. The IFFC Authority Act provides for both roles as an important preamble to the IFFC Authority Act, that it will play a role for development and regulation. So first time in India, you have a framework within the authority passed by the Act of Parliament, which vests us with the power of development and regulations both, and which helps us to reach out to the stakeholders, understand their requirements, and try and bring in those enablers which the stakeholders consider necessary for certain businesses to grow. Obviously, we benchmark our practices with the global best practices, and thereby all the check and balances in terms of KYC, AML, all the guidelines are completely either to. And we take a lot of efforts in ensuring that the global business can be brought onshore and the Indian entities can go global through the IFFC platform. So that thereby we consider ourselves more as a gateway for undertaking international financial services, both from India perspective going global and the global businesses coming to India. So for example, the fund set up in IFFC would have an opportunity to invest into India. Indian companies can invest into IFFC entities or can invest into global entities. So from all three perspectives, we become quite unique in terms of providing opportunities for Indian as well as the global entities. I'll stop here. Would be very happy to take up questions that you would have, or in future would be very happy to connect with your professionals, firms, and the chartered accountancy firms who wants to come and set up their operations here, or understand the business opportunities more from their client perspective. So from all purpose, I would urge all of you to have a deeper, closer look at the opportunity available right next door to where you are, and become a global firm, global consultancy, global chartered accountancy firm through an IFFC opportunity of the Government of India. I thank the chapter for taking this unique unique initiative of bringing the IFFC and the IFFC business opportunity for your members. We look forward to be on a continuous dialogue with your chapter and various other professional firms which are part of your members in present today and who are not able to attend. Would be happy to interact with them in future. Thank you very much for inviting us to be part of this this unique initiative which you've taken for your members.
Thank you, sir, for such a wonderful session where you covered the GIFT City and IFSC. Is there any questions that we check?
Vijay, there are one or two common questions which you can combine and take up. One, as Dipesh Bhai said, that chartered accountants can come and set up in IFSC. One issue is that whether this would require any separate permission from ICI, because it requires that you set up a separate entity in IFSC. So being a CA firm, how can you set up a separate entity? And is there any exemption for chartered accountants?
So our framework allows the branch to be open. So you can open a branch. The CA firm can open the branch in the IFFC. And in fact, we already licensed a couple of chartered accountancy firm in the IFFC already. So it is very much permitted.
Okay.
In Q&A box, there are no questions, it seems.
If you permit, shall I take few questions, or you want other speakers to first take and then?
You can take till the question comes now. You can carry on, PJ.
Sorry.
Yeah, you can take the few questions.
Okay. So Dipesh bhai, one question was I generally get queries from a lot of people when I talk to them about IFSC, is that if since this is an IFSC and if it is a company which is not into IFSC, can it come and set up its entity there if it is doing some offshore business?
Yeah, so see, the mandate of the IFFC authority is the financial services, which means that firms which are into financial services, financial product or financial institutions, these are the one which can set up in the IFFC zone. Apart from that, taking the clue from the other global financial centers, what we have done is we have also permitted the professional services firms to come in, because they become a very important enabler for the ecosystem. You know, you go to any financial center, the first firm that hits your eyes is the consultancy or a chartered accountancy or a company secretary type of an institution or an entity, which helps you to set up in the whole zone. And that's what we have taken initiative, that we welcome some of the professional firms to come in and help the clients, because the demand is quite substantial in terms of applications. For example, last unit approval committee, we had 20 plus application at one go for new entities to come in the IFFC zone. Now you can imagine the flow is quite high, and the professional firms need to provide services of incorporation, compliances, then regularly helping them to ensure the new business models which can be structured for their businesses. So quite a substantial business opportunities are there, which needs continuous handholding from professionals for the clients. And we believe that this is a unique in terms of multidisciplinary type of a practice. For example, you practice in banking, insurance, capital market, aircraft financing, bullion, global in-house centers. So, you know, it's a multidisciplinary type of a practice available. Help to grow professional firms much larger in their area of practice, whereas in India you are been comfortably growing, but this provides you an additional avenue in terms of your professional career.
Okay, Dipesh, apart from this, there is also a section which is called a non-IFSC section, where those who are not into IFSC sector can set up and get some benefits, though not a complete IFSC benefit. So can you share those ideas? I mean, what is that concept?
Yeah, so the IFFC is housed in the SEZ, which is the SEZ, as you are aware, is the policy of Government of India for the export of manufactured goods or for services. So this is the zone. GIFT City SEZ is a multi-service SEZ. So apart from financial services, there can be IT, software, or BPO, KPO, which can also come in, or that can be other type of services, which may not be licensed by the IFFC authority, but they will be provided approval by the SEZ authority. However, as you are aware that in India, there was a sunset clause for the SEZs, and thereafter the exemption from the profit tax exemption, that has been done away with. So the new units in an SEZ now don't enjoy 5 plus 5 plus 5, 15-year tax exemptions, which was earlier available, and that has gone into a sunset now. But from an IFFC, which is in financial services firm or professional ancillary, which is approved by the IFFC authority, they enjoy 10-year tax holiday under Section 80LA of the income tax, which is out of 15, you can choose any 10 years, and all the business income is tax-free for them. Even the MAT, if you've chosen the new tax rates, even the MAT has been brought down to 9%, but even that does not apply for the firms operating here.
Yeah, there is one more question, sir. What is the eligibility criteria for chartered accountant to open office?
They have to make an application as per the framework issued by the IFFC authority. It is available on our website, all ancillary framework. This was dated 10th February 2021, and there was one amendment on June 10, 2021. Both are available on our website under the circular called Framework for Enabling Ancillary Services at the International Financial Services Center. And there are permissible ancillary services defined, what all you can do, what type of services you can offer. And if you meet those criteria, that's an application form which you can fill in and submit to the IFSCA authority. And based on that, we consider the applications and provide the approvals as per the framework.
Yeah, Kinjal, any more questions?
No, I think
That's it. Now request Ravi Soni to propose a well-deserved vote of thanks to our first speaker.
Thanks a lot, Vijay sir, for giving me this opportunity. Members, you would agree that Dipesh Shah has covered the topic, the introduction to International Financial Service Center Authority and GIFT City in a very detailed manner. And I'm sure that now we have the idea what is the GIFT City and how we can open how the new opportunities are there for CAs also in this field. And I'm sure this would be very helpful to our member in their day-to-day practice. And thanks, Dipesh sir, for taking out your time from your busy schedule and enriching the knowledge to our members. I, on behalf of Borivali Central Study Circle, extend a hearty vote of thanks and request member to carry out a round of applause for the sir.
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll start with our second session, that is on the tax and regulatory provisions which will be affecting the IFSC and GIFT City. We have two eminent advocates, Ishita Khare and Shah. Now I request our committee member Ravi Soni to introduce both of them.
Thank you, Vijay sir. It is my pleasure to introduce the speaker, Ishita Khare and Shah. So Ishita is a senior advocate with Khaitan and Company in Mumbai and works with the investment fund practice for the firm. She had professional experience in advising clients in matter relating to a fund formation, setting up investment platform, investors negotiation, investment advisory portfolio, and other funds related to GIFT City. She has been active in working on the notification for establishment of an international bullion exchange in IFC along with the World Gold Council and Gift City. Ishita is also a regular in publishing articles in relation to recent development in AIF and IFSC space in magazine and journal with the team. She is also winner of the International Bar Association Asia Pacific Regional Forum 2018 Conference Room Scholarship and was a part of International Bar Association Conference 2019 Seoul, South Korea. Now I will introduce the second speaker, Sneha Shah. Sneha Shah is a principal associate in the direct tax practice in Mumbai and a chartered accountant and lawyer by profession. Sneha has been part of the direct tax practice of the Khaitan and Company since 2016. Sneha focuses and has rich experience on transaction tax matter for both private equity and strategic investment, including domestic and cross-border shares and business acquisition, and on global deals, having an India leg, and provides assistance on all aspects such as structuring of the investment, disinvestment, due diligence. Sneha is also actively provide advice in relation to the regulated fund sector, including the domestic fund structure such as AIF, AIF and other activities. With this brief introduction, now we will present the e-memento to Siddharth sir. Now I request both the speaker to take the charge and just start the session.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for the introduction. Thank you, Dipesh, sir, for the insightful session a while back. It's set the tone for the discussion very well. Sneha and I will be discussing the regulatory and tax aspects of the IFSC regime in Gift City. We prepared a brief presentation, so I'll just share that with you. Just give me a second. Yeah, is this visible?
Yes, madam, it's visible.
Okay, thank you. As Dipesh has already elaborated on how fortified the IFSC regime has now grown as a dynamic playground for financial stakeholders, essentially spread across fund managers, portfolio managers, investment advisors, stockbrokers, and the likes. Gift City has been making news every day, and it has emerged as a very powerful, it's actually a powerhouse for financial services, financial products, and financial institutions that are looking to operate closer to home. And I think we've seen it achieve its slogan of onshoring the offshore in quite a practical sense. So it's something that has achieved quite eminence in the recent times. With its world-class infrastructure, conducive legal regulatory tax regime, the unified regulator that Dipesh had spoken about, that is the IFSCA, and the constant support that has been given by the central and the state governments, IFSC has been garnering attention both from global and domestic players. One thing which is important to be kept in mind, and I'm putting it at the start of the presentation so that something which the audience would like to keep remembering while we take you through the regulatory and tax bits, is that a financial institution which is set up as a unit in IFSC is treated as a person resident outside India, and therefore it is subject to the exchange from a exchange control perspective. Therefore, the transactions between IFSC units and residents are subject to FEMA. However, the IFSC units are considered to be resident entities for the purposes of Income Tax Act. So this dichotomy will have to be kept in mind while we consequently unravel the regulatory and tax parts related to the IFSC regime. Basically, companies, firms, AOPs, body of individuals, and artificial juridical persons may render financial services out of IFSC. IFSC units may conduct business, as Dipesh had also pointed out, in only foreign currency in IFSC since it's deemed foreign territory. So it's non-INR in terms of transaction currency. So with this brief introduction, while Sir has already covered about what IFSCA is as a unified regulator, was established in 2019. It has representation from different financial regulators such as the RBI, SEBI, IRDAI, and PFRDA. The idea behind this was to basically have a single window regulator of sorts, because there's so many, there's such vibrance of financial services that are being conducted out of IFSC. A lot of approvals, a lot of applications would have to be would be relevant essentially for conducting operations out of IFSC. So from that perspective, having a unified regulator at a supra level, at an overarching level, has definitely been helpful in expediting approval processes, in reducing the approval time. And in fact, as lawyers, when we've interacted with the IFSCA, we've seen that they've been really prompt and supportive in helping applicants and new entities test the waters in IFSC. So from that perspective, it has really streamlined the launch of entities in GIFT City from that perspective. So the IFSCA, the role of IFSCA, as I had said, is bifurcated into development and regulation of financial products, financial services, and financial institutions in IFSC, and the functions are analogous to the role as well. The powers are also analogous to the financial regulator powers with respect to only the products institutes and the services that are rendered out of IFSC. So I'll just go to the next slide, which is AIFs and IFSC. So for the purposes of this presentation, we've only captured 4 principal regulatory regimes, which are AIFs and IFSC, portfolio managers, foreign portfolio investors, and investment advisors in IFSC. To begin with, AIFs have been gaining a lot of traction in IFSC. We've seen a lot of interest in fund managers, both in India and abroad, with respect to setting up operations in IFSC. The regulatory framework for funds in IFSC is that the AIF regulations apply mutatis mutandis, that is, they apply as is to AIFs unless they are qualified by the IFSC guidelines and the IFSC operating guidelines and the IFSC A circulars that are released by the regulator. The regulator for IFSC AIFs would be the IFSC authority, and which is SEBI for non-IFSC AIFs in India. As regards to the choice of vehicle, it could be similar to non-IFSC AIFs. That is, it can be a LLP, a company, or a trust. Same goes for the categories of IFSC AIFs. It can be a category 1 IFSC AIF, which is for early venture capital funds, angel funds. Category 2 AIFs basically for private equity funds, and category 3 AIFs for hedge funds engaging in complex trading strategies, leverage hedge funds essentially. So from that perspective, IFSC AIFs and non-IFSC AIFs are at par. An important consideration to be kept in mind with respect to setting up of the sponsor and manager in IFSC is that the sponsor entity for an existing AIF in India can act as the sponsor of an IFSC AIF. The manager of an IFSC AIF can be set up as a branch, or it can be set up as a subsidiary. If it is set up as a branch, technically no prior approval is required. If it is set up as a subsidiary, then the relevant regulatory approvals will be triggered under the ODI regulations, because IFSC is a deemed foreign territory. From that perspective, the approvals will be triggered. The next relevant point in this regard is respect to the mandatory commitment. So for AIFs also, for the non-IFSC AIFs, SEBI mandates that the sponsor or manager has to put in the mandatory skin in the game continuing sponsor or manager commitment amount, which is the same position for IFSC AIFs as well. However, there is a special dispensation with respect to this point, which we'll be discussing in the later slide, where the sponsor entity is an Indian party. The other point relevant to this is with respect to participation of Indian residents as investors under the LRS route. So the RBI has recently allowed Indian residents to make remittance under the LRS in IFSC, provided that the remittance must be only made for making investments in securities other than securities issued by entities resident in India. So this basically would enable resident investors also to invest in IFSC AIFs. So I'll just go to the next slide. This is actually quite a detailed snapshot of the regulatory framework which is applicable to IFSC AIFs. I'm not going into a lot of detail of the entire chart, but just to cover it quickly, the minimum corpus and the continuing interest would be similar for IFSC AIFs as it is for a non-IFSC AIF. The only difference that you would see is that the amounts are denominated in dollars because it's deemed foreign territory IFSC, so non-INR currency. Like I'd mentioned in the previous slide, the sponsor contribution from an Indian party will be considered as ODI under automatic route, subject to compliance with Regulation 7 of the ODI regulations. So Regulation 7 has certain prudential norms, capital adequacy requirements, net worth requirement, NOC requirements, all of those conditions that have to be fulfilled. So once those are fulfilled, then the sponsor commitment can come in IFSC AIF through the automatic route. The other relevant point to be kept in mind here is that in order to facilitate offshore funds that are not set up in India, to come and set up operations in India in IFSC, that is basically to re-domicile to IFSC, the option to put this mandatory sponsor commitment has been made voluntary for such relocating funds. So this is also basically a move to fill up the fund setup activities in IFSC. Then I'll just quickly go to this permissible investments point, which is basically IFSC AIFs can invest in securities listed in IFSC, securities issued by companies incorporated in IFSC, securities issued by companies incorporated in India or companies belonging to foreign jurisdiction, units of other AIFs, and other permissible investments by as per the AIF regulations. There are 4 or 5 very important relaxations that have been granted for IFSC AIFs, which actually make them very conducive for investment fund managers, more so because fund managers can use these relaxations to come up with inventive investment strategies and innovative fund structures. One of them is borrowing. So non-IFSC AIFs are subject to borrowing restrictions. This is not applicable for IFSC AIFs, subject to certain conditions, but those restrictions per se are not applicable to IFSC AIFs. Similarly, co-investment is something which is not permissible for non-IFSC AIFs. That is, a non-IFSC AIF cannot issue units within an AIF to permit co-investment. However, this has been allowed for an IFSC AIF. Further, an IFSC AIF can also co-invest along with an AIF which is based outside IFSC but in India. The third dispensation is with respect to diversification norms. That is a 25% investment limit per portfolio company for Cat 1, Cat 2 AIFs and 10% investment limit per portfolio company for Cat 3 AIFs do not apply to IFSC AIFs. So these 3 dispensations are considered to be these great boons for IFSC AIFs per se, and are basically garnering a lot of attention in fund managers. One more important point here is that IFSC AIFs are not subject to any restrictions with respect to overseas investments, unlike domestic AIFs. As in, domestic AIFs are subject to investment restrictions with respect to overseas investments. So I'll just go to the next slide. This slide is quite, I think it's quite straightforward. The minimum investment amount for an investor for an IFSC AIF would be similar to a non-IFSC AIF. The amount is denominated in dollars. The application process to set up an IFSC AIF is more or less similar to a SEBI application. That is in the sense that it has a Form A application, but the regulator will be IFSC A. And further, we have seen IFSCA expediting the applications quite a lot. So from that perspective, we expect that the SEBI AIF application approval process would be quite cut down from a timing perspective when it comes to IFSC AIFs. And the eligible investors for IFSC AIFs would be limited to persons not resident in India, non-resident Indians, resident individuals permitted to invest under LRS, which I've covered in my previous slide, and resident institutional investors that are permitted to invest outside India under FEMA. So this structure, this diagram looks a bit complicated, but it's basically, we've tried to show how different forms of funds can be used by managers in India, in IFSC, and in offshore jurisdictions to come up with different master feeder structures. So while it's not necessary that all these structures have to be in place, but we've from a presumption perspective, we've tried to show everything in this slide, and this is typically how a fund structure would look like if you try to use IFSC as either a standalone fund or a feeder fund or a master fund. So yeah, this at least concludes the AIF bit. I would request me to take up the taxation regime in IFSC.
Yes, hi everyone. So, as Ishita said, one important thing to note is that while IFSC is a foreign territory from the purpose of FEMA, it is considered as a resident from an Indian income tax perspective. Since, the GIFT City has been set up, there have been various tax benefits, tax SOPs, which have been introduced to provide for a beneficial tax regime for IFSCs. I'll just quickly take you to some of the key taxation aspects which would be relevant for units set up in IFSC or for investors in IFSC. So the first most important point is, of course, the tax holiday, which is available under Section 8 PLA of the Income Tax Act for units set up in the IFSC. Under this provision, there is a 100% tax deduction which is provided for business income earned by an IFSC unit for a block of 10 consecutive years in a total period of 15 years. And this period of 15 years is essentially supposed to be considered from when the IFSC unit got its registration. The next benefit, which is important to note, is that there's a beneficial rate of 9% for MAT or AMT. And of course, now with the new corporate tax regimes, where a company opts to be taxed at the 22% corporate tax rates, the MAT provisions do not apply. And hence, a company which is set up in IFSC and which opts to be taxed for such 22% tax rate can avail both the tax deduction and the 100% tax deduction and the exemption from the MAT provisions. The next important, benefit, so to say, is certain exemptions provided to non-residents in case of lending in relation to IFSC units. So the first exemption is that any non-resident who extends a borrowing to a unit set up in IFSC, the interest payable to such non-resident shall be exempt from withholding tax. And the next important exemption is in relation to long investments made by non-residents in long-term bonds or rupee-denominated bonds which have been listed on an IFSC exchange. Such bonds are taxable at a lower rate of 4% as compared to the general withholding tax rate on interest. With respect to securities which are listed on an IFSC exchange, there are certain exemptions which have been provided if such securities are transferred on an IFSC exchange and the consideration is payable in foreign currency. These exemptions are also for a non-resident or a Category 3 AIF IFSC. The securities for which such exemption is available is a GDR, rupee-denominated bonds, derivatives, and certain other securities as would be specified by the CP. Ishita, you can go on the next slide. So, as Ishita mentioned, the entire fund industry is, gaining a lot of traction in IFSC. And what is important to note that is in September 2020, the government introduced a highly beneficial tax regime for Category 3 AIFs, which have been set up in IFSCs. So this exemption is essentially available for Category 3 AIFs, which have all non-resident investors, except for the units which are to be issued by to a sponsor or manager of the AIF. So generally speaking, in terms of the exemptions that are available, there is first, an investor level exemption that has been provided to non-resident investors in the IFSC. As per this exemption, any income arising to a non-resident investor on transfer of the AIF units would be exempt from tax. And also the tax, there is an exemption for other income which arises to such investor. Essentially the income, the way the exemption provisions and the benefit provisions are provided, all the income is taxable at the fund level, that is subject to certain exemptions, and it all becomes exempt at the investor level. So coming to the fund level taxation, there are certain exemptions that have been provided for income arising to a category 3 AIF. And this exemption is available to the extent that the units of such category 3 AIFs are held by non-resident investors. So one of the first exemptions is in case of investments made by the AIF in offshore securities that is in jurisdictions other than India, there is an exemption to the category 3 AIF for such income. In respect to securities that are trading in India or of Indian entities, there is also an exemption available subject to certain exceptions. Thirdly, there's an exemption that is available for interest and dividend income, or rather not an exemption, a beneficial tax rate of 10%, which is available to a category 3 AIF on interest and dividend income, which is brought from securities. Then, as Dipesh sir mentioned, there is a GST exemption on services that are provided in IFSC. There are certain SCT, CTT, and stamp duty exemptions for transactions undertaken on IFSC stock exchanges. Another new development is, in the budget 2021, certain exemptions were introduced in relation to aircraft leasing activities that are undertaken by an IFSC. The first exemption that has been introduced is an exemption for royalty or interest income, which is earned by a non-resident from leasing an aircraft to a unit set up in IFSC. And this exemption is available provided that the IFSC unit has commenced operations by 31st March 2024. The next exemption is, the extension of the 10-year tax holidays for income which arises to an IFSC unit on transfer of an aircraft or an aircraft engine, which prior to such transfer was leased to a domestic company engaged in the operation of aircrafts. So these two provisions were introduced by Budget 2021 to provide for certain benefits in relation to aircraft leasing activities. And additionally, lastly, there are certain subsidies which have been extended by the state of Gujarat for units set up in IFSC. Ishita, can you go to the next slide? So the relocation of offshore funds to GIFT City. This is one of the most important changes which was introduced by Budget 2021. The change essentially provides for a tax-neutral manner in which offshore funds can relocate to an AIF set up in IFSC. So when we say relocation, the way the mechanics work is that the offshore fund transfers its assets to an AIF set up in IFSC, and in consideration for such transfer, the AIF set up in IFSC has to issue units either to the offshore fund or to the shareholders of the offshore fund in the same proportion as their shareholding in the original fund. The new tax regime essentially provides for this entire relocation to be undertaken in a tax-neutral manner. Some certain specific exemptions which have been introduced to enable such tax-neutral relocation is an exemption from capital gains tax to the original fund, that is the offshore fund, on transfer by way of this relocation of its investments to the resultant fund. So the transfer from the original fund to the resultant fund is exempt. The second exemption which has been provided is to the shareholders or the unit holders of the offshore fund for transfer of shares units held in the original fund or the offshore fund for shares or units of the IFSC AIF. And while these exemptions from capital gains tax are provided to the offshore funds and the shareholders, a similar exemption is provided under Section 56 of the Income Tax Act for receipt of such investments by the AIF set up in IFSC and for receipt of units of the AIF by the investors. Additionally, an exemption is provided under Section 79, whereas the provisions which generally trigger the lapse of losses on a change in shareholding of more than 49%, this would not apply in case of such change in shareholding is pursuant to a relocation of shares. So these are all the steps which enable a tax-neutral relocation of an offshore fund into an IFSC. Another important provision which was introduced is in relation to transfers post-relocation. As per this provision, post-relocation, if an IFSC transfers certain investments, certain shares, And if these shares would have originally not been taxable, if it was held directly by the offshore fund, even transfer by the IFSC AIF would not be subject to capital gains tax. So this is overall, the tax regime which has been introduced for relocation of offshore funds to IFSC, and this is, garnered, of course, a lot of interest from the fund industry in general. Ishita, you can move to the next slide.
Insightful download of the tax regime. So I'll just get back on the regulatory part. Now we'll be discussing on the foreign portfolio investors in IFSC. So FPIs, basically, it's pretty straightforward when it comes to IFSC. There are two types of entities that can set up as FPIs in IFSC. One, which are already registered with SEBI as FPIs and they can operate out of IFSC. In that case, those entities don't need to undergo additional documentation. They don't need to undergo due diligence again. That is, the trading members of IFSC stock exchanges can rely on the due diligence which has been undertaken by the non-IFSC based DDPs when they were applying for FPI registration under SEBI. So that way the process is streamlined. The other class of entities that can apply for FPI registration would be the eligible foreign investors, which are EFIs. They would also need to register with SEBI as FPI, but they can operate out of IFSC. EFIs would have to comply with the laws of IFSC as well as the FPI regulations to the extent applicable. With respect to the entities that are registered with SEBI as FPIs and are operating out of GIFT City, they will have to ensure that there is segregation of funds with respect to their operations out of IFSC and within IFSC. So that is something that they'll have to keep in mind essentially. Then any entity which is operating out of IFSC is considered to be deemed regulated. So when such entity is applying for an FPI registration, it can apply for a Cat1 FPI license as well. Other than that, IFSC-based FPIs are permitted to participate in commodity derivatives as investments. And also there are basically 3 eligibility conditions that are not applicable per se to IFSC based entities when they are applying for FPI registration, which is basically that the applicant does not have to be a resident Indian. The applicant is a resident of a country whose securities market regulators these bodies, and the applicant being a bank is a resident of a country whose central bank is a member of the Bank of Settlements. So these are the special dispensation for the entities which are based in IFSC and are looking to apply for an FPI registration. Coming to the next regime, which is portfolio managers. So with respect to portfolio managers, the regulatory framework would be the same. The principle would be the same as the FPIFs, that is, the SEBI portfolio manager regulations would apply unless mutatis mutandis, unless they are qualified by the IFSC guidelines and the IFSCA operating framework specifically brought out for portfolio managers operating out of IFSC. From a structuring perspective, the portfolio managers can be structured as a company or an LLP. There are minimum net worth requirements laid down for portfolio managers looking to operate out of IFSC. SEBI registered intermediaries or international associates of these intermediaries can also register as portfolio managers in IFSC, subject to prior approval of SEBI. Also, while if in case a subsidiary is seeking registration as a portfolio manager in IFSC, it will have to satisfy the net worth requirement. However, if it does not have the net worth requirement, if it does not meet the net worth requirement, the parent entity will can be considered for its application process. Then, with respect to the manpower requirement, exclusive manpower will have to be allocated for providing portfolio management services out of IFSC. With respect to ring fencing, the parent entity, if a portfolio manager is set up as a subsidiary in IFSC, then the parent entity is required to ring fence its operations, which is outside IFSC, that is the domestic operations, legally, financially, operationally, technologically, from its branch operations. However, there is a practical sort of an issue in this, because if the net worth of a parent is being considered for a subsidiary which does not meet the net worth requirement, then this ring fencing of financial operations of the parent and the subsidiary could lie in the gray area. So that could be a potential issue here. Further, the obligation of compliance of the branch or the subsidiary operating in IFSC as a portfolio manager would lie on the parent. So it will have to ensure that the subsidiary or the branch is complying with the applicable law. The qualification requirements are analogous for the principal officer and the decision-making person or the employee within the portfolio manager operating in IFSC are analogous with the portfolio manager regulations laid down by SEBI. So if you are a non-resident person who is a principal officer or decision-making employee of a portfolio manager, then you will have to have a certification from any organization, institution, or an association which has been ratified by the financial market regulator of that foreign jurisdiction of which you are a resident of. And in case you are an Indian resident, then NISM certification would be the relevant qualification. Eligible clients for a portfolio manager based out of IFSC would be similar to that of eligible investors for an AIF, that is a person resident outside India, non-resident Indians, resident individuals permitted to invest outside under LRS, and the resident institutions permitted to invest outside under FEMA. Segregation of funds, portfolio managers operating in IFSC will be required to segregate the funds of its clients and in separate bank accounts and in banking IFSC banking unit or the IBU as permitted by the RBI in IFSC. So this is broadly the framework applicable for portfolio managers in IFSC. So the last regime which we'll be covering for IFSC is the investment advisors. Again, the regulatory framework has the same principles. SEBI regulations for investment advisors apply until qualified by the IFSC guidelines and IFSC operating circulars specifically brought out for investment advisors. Eligible clients again would comprise of the same persons resident outside India, non-resident Indians, institutional investors, and resident individuals permitted to invest outside India. Qualifications are broadly twofold: professional experience, professional qualification, and experience qualification. Again, for Indians, it would have NIS, it could be NISM, and for non-residents, it would be a financial regulator ratified qualification, basically something which is equivalent to NISM in that country. And the net worth requirement again has been laid down for IAs, for IFSC under the IFSC operating guidelines for IAs. In this case also, if a subsidiary is not able to meet the net worth requirement, then the parent's net purposes. So I think this is, I think, the penultimate slide for our presentation. It broadly lays down the steps required for setting up a unit in IFSC. I will not take up a lot of time on this, just quickly run through the steps. The first step is basically submitting an LOI. You'll have to, an applicant will have to basically get it for basically reserving a space in IFSC. They would have to get a PLOA issued in their favor. They will also have to submit a Form F with the Development Commissioner for their review. Then the third step would be the issuance of a PLOA, where the GIFT SEZ would issue a provisional letter of allotment to the applicant for the allocation of office space, and the Development Commissioner would review the Form F in the same time. Along with that, the applicant basically will also have to get the approval of the relevant regulator, whichever regulator is relevant, for example, RBI, SEBI. So that approval will also have to be taken. Then after these steps have been completed, the Development Commissioner will grant its approval, the final approval, which is a letter of approval. And the final letter of allotment will also be issued, which will basically finalize the space that you will be occupying in IFSC. And then you will be entering into a lease or leave and license agreement with the developer. And after that, you can apply for the different business licenses that you will need for commencement of business operations in GIFT City. So basically, the upcoming trends that are relevant from an IFSC perspective. And I think Dipesh has already covered a lot of these in his part of the presentation at the start. But I think a very notable trend is the VCC, something which is very, very much awaited by fund managers, the variable capital company framework. The committee report is already out, and the committee has in fact looked at a lot of international jurisdictions to come up with a very, very coherent framework which would basically operate in IFSC. It's basically about this VCC having an existence of its own, which will be separate from its shareholders, having a variable capital structure, having the capacity to enter into contracts of its own, having the capacity to sue or be sued, having multiple sub-fund structures wherein each sub-fund will have its own assets and liabilities. So again, the fund managers will have a lot to play with respect to the variable capital company structures once it gets on ground in IFSC. The other thing is longevity finance, again, something which is quite unique. Transgenerational value creation is the idea behind this initiative. It's basically creating a chain of innovative financial products. And the idea is to meet the needs of different age groups, the financial needs, the society needs of different age groups. And the third trend which IFSC is seeing is the framework for global regional corporate treasury centers, which the sir had also elaborated upon. That is, you can be a finance company or a finance unit set up in GIFT City, and you can service your group entities outside GIFT City as treasury centers. Then offshore trading, basically IFSC emerging as an offshore trading center in INR. So that is also something which is developing. And lastly, again, as Sir had mentioned, the International Trade Financing Services platform, which is like an electronic platform for exporters and importers for trade and financing, something which GIFT City is also very actively developing in recently, and it's in the works. So yes, GIFT City is a space definitely to watch out for, and presents resplendent opportunities for not only financial service providers, but also for service providers like lawyers, CAs, and everybody. So yeah, that sums up our presentation. Please let us know if you have any questions.
Madam, there are one question. Is there any tax exemption to chartered accountant firms who is setting up a business in IFSC?
Yeah, hi, this is Sneh.
Yeah.
Essentially, chartered accountant firms, it would need to be seen whether they fulfill the characterization for the ancillary activities which could be set up in IFSC, and then there should be an exemption which is available.
Okay. Now, next question: is there any tax benefit for non-resident investors making investment in IFSC AIFs?
Yes, of course. So like I said, there are several exemptions which have been introduced in case of a category 3 AIF. I discussed this in one of my previous slides. Largely, these exemptions are in relation to exemption to the investor from transfer of category 3 AIF units for income which comes to the AIF unit, and also at the category 3 AIF as well. There are certain exemptions from transfer of certain offshore and onshore securities. There's a beneficial tax rate of 10% for income from dividend interest. So there are several exemptions or benefits which have been introduced for non-residents which are investing in a category 3 AIF.
There are no other questions. Let me check in the chat box. No. I think there are no other questions, madam. Ishita Kare and Sneha has dealt the topic in a more effective and efficient manner on the tax and regulatory provisions. Kinjal bhai, you have any other questions?
One query that, though it seems funny little, but for the benefit of the members, one of the issue that is that these units are treated as offshore units, as if they are not within the territorial jurisdiction of India. So if you set up an entity, and if your employees who are stationed in that unit or at that location, will they be treated as non-resident after 180 days?
Is this question from a tax or a FEMA perspective?
Tax perspective.
So from a tax perspective, generally speaking, an IFSC is not really treated as an offshore entity. It's considered as domestic itself. So there should not be a reason why employees working in IFSC should be considered as non-resident, because the entire scope of taxation which applies to domestic entities also applies to IFSC from a tax perspective.
Okay.
Now I request our core committee member Pratik Maru to propose a well-deserved vote of thanks to both the speakers.
Dr. Vijay sir, for giving me this opportunity. Members, you all would agree that Advocate Ishita and Advocate Sneh has covered this topic on tax and regulatory provisions in GIFT City in very lucid manner. Thanks a lot to both the speakers for their in-depth presentation. I'm sure this will be very helpful to our members. Thanks a lot both the speakers for taking out time from your busy schedule and enriching the knowledge of members. I, on behalf of Borivali Central CP Study Circle, extend a very hearty vote of thanks to Advocate Ishita and Advocate Sneh and request all the members to carry on proud round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you, Pratik. So we'll start with the third session of the day. As members will aware that the professional opportunity for a chartered accountant is increasing day by day. We should not worry whether GST audit is gone or tax audit limit is increased or not. We should never worry about that. There are new avenues which the government is giving to the chartered accountant. One of the areas what we having today, the IFSC and GCP, where we can have ample opportunity. So what are those opportunities for a chartered accountant? We have an eminent speaker, Anish Thakurji, who will be dealing with this topic. Now I request Pratik Maru to briefly introduce.
Thanks a lot, Vijay sir. Anish Thakur sir is a fellow member of an Institute of Chartered Accountants, and he's a law graduate from Mumbai University. He has experience of more than 32 years in income tax advisory, compliance, and litigation assignments. He's partner tax regulatory services with EY and has joined the EY on February 2019. Prior to that, he has been working with BSR, and prior to that, he has his own firm named AM Thakur and Company. He was a president at CTC for the year 2021. Is a core group member of BCAS and CTC. He has written many articles in newspapers, business magazines, and professional journals. Has been contributing in various conferences. He has appeared on television as a guest speaker on business channels like CNBC, Awaaz, Bloomberg TV, and NDTV. Has been a visiting faculty at Sydenham in between the year 2008 and 10. And also has been a guest speaker as on date in various management institutes. With this brief introduction, I welcome Anish sir to BCSE, and we would like to present you an e-memento. Ravi, if you can just share.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir. I would request now, sir, to please take charge of the session.
Thank you. Respected dignitaries on the desk, members of Borivali Central CP Study Circle, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to be associated with this session on IFSC. And IFSC, as was rightly put, is a new concept. At the outset, my apologies for coming in a little late. There was some conflicting engagement which I just couldn't avoid. But I am glad that I made it in the nick of time. And thanks to Nilesh Bhai also for reminding me to join, to be honest. But yes, I was just about through. So thank you so much again. I would, want to put in a presentation, and I will take you through that presentation on opportunities. But before that, I think I just want to make 2 or 3 points. The IFSC is an absolutely novel concept. In a way, it is the closest thing to capital account convertibility today that we have seen, as compared to the days of the past where under the erstwhile FERA, everything was prohibited, right? And you were always on tenterhooks on whether you would, fall foul of that draconian law and ultimately have to go for compounding. So we are in a regime where, there's a lot of liberalization. And this is even further liberalization. And I would think that this concept, though starting with financial services, though starting with, things like aircraft leasing, for example, will at some point in time move to more and, diverse activities. And I would think that this is very important to remember, right? As we are all aware, GIFT is in that sense a special economic zone which is notified as a financial services center. So basically all that applies to a special economic zone also applies to GIFT. And I was hearing one question which was asked from the audience that Kinjal Bhai asked, that will a person employed in GIFT be non-resident? And one has to appreciate that the deeming fiction that GIFT creates or the RBI regulation create is only the fact that a person who operates out of GIFT is deemed to be non-resident. GIFT is not deemed to be a foreign territory. And therefore, as rightly explained by Sneh in her answer, there is no requirement to call it a territory outside India. It is very much a territory within India. And it is sometimes that dichotomy which creates a little bit of complication. So if you would have seen Sneh's presentation on tax, sometimes you're wondering whether are we really treating this territory as a non-resident, or are we treating this territory as something local? And that dichotomy will, I would believe, be addressed by the government at some point in time. But in certain areas, that dichotomy still remains. And my personal view is that at some point in time, you will have a separate chapter in the Income Tax Act, a separate chapter in FEMA, which will deal with activities being conducted in this IFSC. With that, let me try and share my screen so that we come to what are the professional opportunities in the IFSC. Let me just put the slide on slideshow mode. Thank you. All right. Now, if we see, as I was saying, we divide this into some 2 or 4, 4 different things. One is obviously what are the opportunities as far as GIFT is concerned. And I'm going to put myself off video for those of you who know. I have very high myopia. For those of you who don't know, let me share with you that I do have very high myopia, and it becomes very difficult for me to, all that you will see is my head as it is appearing now if I read something from the slide. And it's in today's day of PowerPoint, it becomes very difficult to this thing. I also welcome Dipesh Bhai and thank him again for being here. Very nice of him to be present throughout and, looking at what I am saying for the opportunities. I'm going to stop the share for a while, turn off the video and start the sharing again. So what are the opportunities for chartered accountants like you and me, right? We always, as was rightly put, we are not dependent on government compliance. We are dependent on value addition that we do to ourselves and to the society at large. So let's look at, conceptually, what is it that gift is? And this is probably just sort of a reminder that obviously gift is a delineated, fully duty-free enclave, right, which is aimed to be the hub of financial services transactions. It does seek to bring into India whatever overseas financial transactions used to happen. And I must say that the work that the IFSCA and Dipesh Bhai have done in this, area are really, really, praiseworthy and are really, really fantastic. Sorry. It offers you a regulatory environment which is at par, and also a physical environment which is at par with anything that you will get overseas. So I'm sure Dipesh Bhai has taken you through whatever GIFT has achieved, and I think it's again very, very important. And GIFT is obviously ranked third by the Global Financial Services Index as one of the 15 centers that are likely to become more significant going forward. So as far as our clients are concerned, they have opportunities to set up finance companies for core and non-core activities. There are opportunities for listing of their securities at the IFSC exchanges, which increase the role for brokers, for merchant bankers, for all sorts of capital market players. There's also participation through structured products and access products that clients can come. And of course, there's set up opportunities for insurance and banking clients, which again, give us a lot of opportunities, because there's a lot of advisory and there's a lot of compliance involved as far as insurance and banking is concerned. There's also custody operations which are possible, and there's underwriting, merchant banking, and investment and portfolio management services. So there's a lot of things that clients can do. And with these things that the clients can do, and I'll share this presentation with the study circle later, after this talk is over. So really, in this, I have put two different activities. On the circle are the activities that the clients can do. And on the left-hand side, as the regulations of the IFSCA call them ancillary services, these are what we can do. We can do legal, assistance. We can do a lot of compliance and secretarial work. We can do auditing, accounting, bookkeeping, and taxation services. We can do professional and management consulting services. We can do administration, asset management, support services, and trusteeship, and any other services that the Dipesh Bhai and the IFSCA approve. The whole point is, and we'll delve into each of this, but the whole point is that there are a lot of opportunities which are available to us. And really, in that sense, what is ancillary services, as we saw here, right? The ancillary services are those services which directly or indirectly aid, help, assist, strengthen, or are attendant upon or connected with the services as detailed here in the circle. So I would believe that there is a lot of flexibility available to us around. And these services are today, I believe, permitted as activities become more sophisticated, as activities become more involved in terms of assistance. I'm sure that chartered accountants will continue to play a significant role into GIFT City. So let's delve into what the eligibility criteria is, right? And if we see the eligibility criteria, a eligible service provider for rendering permissible ancillary services is any existing or a newly incorporated entity set up in the IFSC, can be in the form of a subsidiary or a limited liability partnership or a registered partnership or a branch, right? And therefore, you can set up any of these entities to be able to render services from the IFSC. Okay. And who are the people that you can render the services to? You can render services to entities set up in the IFSC. You can set up the entity to render services to financial services entities from foreign jurisdictions, right? For whatever are those activities that we saw in that circle, right? And or any other related activities overseas, or to any Indian clients who propose to open up or set up or carry out operations in IFSCs or any foreign jurisdiction, provided, very important, the consideration, i.e. the fees that we receive are received in freely convertible foreign currency. And I think this is the ethos of the IFSC, that there is no transaction which is possible where INR transaction, at least as far as inflow is concerned. There are limited INR transactions as far as outflow is concerned, which are possible. And those INR transactions are transactions where you pay for your expenses or you pay your staff, right? Or you procure something locally, because when you have an office, you will require all of those. So all of those are permitted, but any fees that you get has to be under or in freely convertible foreign currency. Yeah. Books of account, of course, have to be maintained in the foreign currency that you are getting, right? So there's an application form. You will, in the application form, write what sort of currency you will be receiving. And in that particular currency, you will also need to do your bookkeeping. Now, let us understand what are these ancillary services within the broad buckets that any chartered accountant can do, right? Now, let's look at legal services. Obviously, we are not law professionals, and therefore we cannot really appear for somebody as a lawyer. But yes, certainly today also we advise on FEMA. Today also we advise on IBC. Today also we advise on Rent Act matters, right? Today also we advise on company law matters. So all of this is possible as far as chartered accountants are concerned. There's also assistance in preparing legal documentation. For that, you don't need to be a lawyer. A lawyer may have to sign off on a legal document as far as a client is concerned, if he is comfortable. But I would believe that, again, as far as preparation or collation of the first draft of a legal document is concerned, certainly chartered accountants can do it. Yeah. Compliance and secretarial, again, is a subset of legal. So obviously, as you know, there are chartered accountants who deal with compliance. You can certainly do local compliance, or at least prepare raw data for local compliance of any other jurisdiction. You can, of course, if the entity is, your client is an entity set up in the IFSC, then there are certain compliance requirements that that entity also has to undertake. And you can help that entity with the compliance and, of course, also company secretarial work. Condition only, remember please, that fees have to be received in convertible foreign currency, and the service recipient has to be as defined under the regulations of the IFSCA. Now, you can, of course, do accounting and auditing, and I'm not going to get into what we can do, but we can do everything, right? So really, financial accounting, review, financial statements, bookkeeping, due diligences, commercial due diligence, for example, right? Little bit of forensic, all of that is possible for your clients sitting out of the IFSC. So there is a lot that you can do, right? It's about skilling and reskilling ourselves to be able to do it. It's about having the required, how do I put it? I wouldn't really use the word expertise. The expertise we all have. It is about having the required infrastructure, the manpower, and the ability to demonstrate that we indeed are capable of rendering all of these services. That should be very, very important. Again, we can render taxation services, which are business planning, tax planning, consulting, tax return preparation, review, any other tax related services. In fact, I would believe that, if there is everything that we can do, only thing I believe we cannot do, and this again, I'm subject to correction by Dipesh, why sitting out of gift, can I appear for an Indian client? My answer is no. I cannot appear online in a faceless assessment or in a video conferencing hearing as part of a faceless assessment. But other than that, everything else I can do, right? And I'm sure that, if I need to appear for a client for a faceless assessment video conferencing, I can always step out of the special economic zone. So that's not a challenge there as well. Again, so management consulting, general management, financial management, marketing management, any other professional services. So the whole vista of what we can do is really, really open in terms of what we otherwise do as normal chartered accountants when we do our practice, right? We can prepare, 3CBs, 3CDs, everything we can do from there. Now, coming to certain non-traditional areas that we can do. There's administration, asset management support services, and trustee services. See, again, there are certain regulated activities. For example, the activity of an asset manager is regulated. So it is not covered by this ancillary activities regulations or this, notification of the IFSCA as far as ancillary services are concerned. That will go as per the normal regulations. So if you are an asset manager to a mutual fund, that will, you will have to comply with SEBI regulations, or AIF asset manager will have to comply with all the AIF regulations for an asset manager. So that we certainly cannot do. But there is a lot of back office work that any asset manager will need, right? And that is certainly something that can be done. Any kind of support services. Trusteeship is something which is not regulated, and trusteeship is something that we can certainly as chartered accountants do, sitting out of GIFT City for GIFT City entities or overseas entities. Of course, the challenge is only going to be that what is it that you will take in terms of liability. A trustee's liability sometimes can be coterminous with that of the beneficiary. So from that perspective, always, we would need to be very careful in terms of what sort of liability we invite onto ourselves. Again, as far as administration is concerned, safeguarding, administering assets or financial products of any other person is certainly possible. So, we can always do those sort of activities where, we can give him financial planning, right? And even, due diligence in terms of safeguarding his financial assets, saying that is there no fraud in his demat account? Today, white collar crime is actually going up. So, you will have, as days go by, need for some of these things, right? Again, as far as asset management support services are concerned, support services to asset management companies for, same kind of situation. Trusteeship of AIF, REIT, InvIT, any security trustee, any other related financial services such as escrow agent. Typically things, escrow agents is typically things, or trusteeship is typically things that law firms do. But today, I think chartered accountants are also well capable of doing these services. And certainly if you have the risk appetite, this is all about risk appetite, certainly go ahead and do it. And as I said, if you want to do certain regulated activities like debenture trustee or AIF manager or investment advisor or fund management, then you will have to apply under those regulations, and these ancillary services regulations will not come. Right now, to get into a little more detail, as far as legal advisory is concerned, drafting of legal opinions, drafting of legal documents, pleadings, representing before IFSCA for anything, for entities regulated by it. Also include research, other work for preparation of a non-judicial case, i.e. researching legal documentation, reviewing reports. If you've seen some of these big law firms, they actually employ lawyers in India to do some of these things. And I would believe that they don't really render legal services, but legal support services. And I see no reason why as chartered accountants we cannot do, particularly when the laws involved are civil laws and not criminal laws. And I would think that that is certainly possible. Again, legal documentation we spoke about, advising in execution of various tasks necessary for the drawing up or certification of documents such as commercial contracts, charters, etc. We don't actually sign off, but we can certainly do all the groundwork. Advisory services related to their, legal rights for clients or obligations under particular contracts, etc. That is something that we can certainly do. Compliance, secretarial services, again, we all know that any kind of compliance, regulatory, filling up of forms, filling up of annual forms, applications, etc. Company secretarial services, keeping board minutes, drafting board minutes, various statutory registers, etc. And again, you can do this support activity even for an entity in a foreign jurisdiction, because support you can provide from anywhere. There may be regulations in those countries requiring a company secretary, as we do in India, but certainly there's a lot of outsourcing that is happening, and we should for sure be able to take advantage of the outsourcing that happens. Again, financial auditing, we know that what is accounting review, what is compiling of financial statements, attestation, bookkeeping, valuation, pro forma statement, due diligence, forensic audit, all of this we know. So I don't think I'm going to get into it. Taxation, again, we know, so I'm not getting into it. You can certainly prepare, and all of the big fours have these practices. They sit out of locations such as Hyderabad, Chennai, and help their overseas practices prepare tax returns, prepare certain forms. In fact, some of the banks, the bigger banks actually have teams sitting in India who interestingly do, there are certain refund claims that customers have to make when there are TDS in various jurisdictions. So you can actually, in India, how it works is that you have a refund claim only and only when you file a return, right? But in certain overseas jurisdictions, you can actually make certain offline refund claims and you don't need to file a return. And banks have big teams here in India who actually sit and prepare and process those applications and then send them out to their foreign counterparts. So I'm sure that something like this is also possible in the GIFT city. And if you're a bank, you can certainly do it. But if you're a chartered accountant and you engage with one of those foreign banks, then I'm sure that you can help them do these things as well. Everybody is looking today for cost optimization in terms of strategy. And therefore, if you're able to give quality work at the right price, then I'm sure some of these things can definitely come to you. Professional services, again, there are a lot of financial products that the IFSC has now permitted. So, having knowledge about those financial products, giving them general guidance on how it is to be done. I'm sure that, the team before me spoke about AIF, and there are so many nuances which are operational as well as regulatory to setting up of an AIF that clients sometimes harrow you to some extent, and we harrow Dipesh bhai as well and he's been very kind enough to always answer all of our questions very, very patiently. But the whole point is that certainly all of these activities also you can do in terms of the professional services. Help somebody set up a business in the IFSC, or tie up with an Indian stroke overseas company. All of those things are possible so long as the fees, as I explained, come in INR, not in INR, in freely convertible foreign currency. Sorry. Advising companies outside India in relation to their business activity or investment activity, including in India or in the IFSC, there's no problem there. It's only advice. You can do it from anywhere. And advising companies or entities in India in respect to their foreign operations also. That is also possible. General management consultancy, business policy, strategy, planning, determination of organization structure, decision-making systems, management information systems, management report, control, turnaround plans, management audit, profit improvement, cost reductions, whatever we generally do for our clients, we can do. Financial management consulting, again, if say you need working capital, then advising on how to get working capital from somewhere, how to manage liquidity properly, determination of the right mix of debt and equity, capital investment proposals, developing accounting systems, budgetary controls, valuations, so many things, right? And marketing management, again, marketing strategy, operations, customer services, pricing, sales management, staff training, so on and so forth. All of these activities are actually permitted by the IFSCA. And the IFSCA, I would believe, wants this center to be a world-class center where somebody who comes into it will get everything that they want within walking distance, within the same geographical area, such that you don't have to worry about where your service provider will come from. So I think these are very, very good opportunities for all of us chartered accountants to be able to do that. These are some of the financial services and some of the financial products that are available. And we'll not go into this in too much of detail. Suffice it to say that there is a lot of things that are possible. Again, products, in terms of products, the securities, insurance contracts, deposit, credit arrangement, contracts other than exchange, in foreign currency swaps. So there's a lot of things that is now opening up. In fact, Dipesh bhai must have definitely spoken about this, so I would rather not speak too much. But I would think that there's a lot of opportunity that is actually opening up. Some regulatory considerations that we have to kind of take care. What is the form of an entity? We discussed that it has to be a company, LLP, or a registered partnership firm, and it has to either be a branch of an existing entity, or it has to be a IFSC incorporated entity, which is incorporated in the IFSC. So you can't, for example, set up a subsidiary of a company unless it's a IFSC incorporated entity, but you can set up the branch of that subsidiary. So one will have to be careful. I do not know if we can set up proprietary concerns. I presume we can. I don't see any problem, but the fact of the matter will be that then you will have to relocate yourself into the IFSC, or at least spend a significant amount of your time into the IFSC, overseeing operations from there. I don't think you can set up a company or a proprietary concern there and work out of Mumbai. That is not going to be possible. There are FEMA considerations for opening of the branch office and the entities in the IFSC. You have to have, certain compliances to be done, etc., permissions to be taken. All of those you will have to do. As far as, net worth is concerned, net worth has to be as on 31st March, and you will have to submit details of persons in control, shareholders, directors, so on and so forth. So, really, if I may just share what we are required to submit at the time of the application. We have to submit our annual financial statements, then a confirmation of compliance with all the regulations, circulars, guidelines, etc. Details of any material regulatory action, if any, which is carried out against us, or and the default currency obviously is US dollars unless the IFSCA specifies anything. So, all of this will happen. And of course, there's a compliance requirement for, all the regulations, etc. And that will have to be self-certified again at periodical intervals. IFSCA has the discretion to, penalize you if or take any other regulatory action as they feel fit. So again, you have to, when you submit your business plan, submit what activity you want to carry out, what are your present employees, and what will be your employees in the IFSC, because ultimately this is not, and this is not something where this is just a booking center. This is something where there has to be physical presence, there has to be movement of people. It's an entire ecosystem. It's not a zone. It's an ecosystem which is going to get created. And therefore, there are, though IFSCA retains with it the power to, approve what are your employees, etc. But if you have lower substance in the IFSC, then there will be a problem. Again, if you're registered with any other regulatory authority, that has to come. We spoke about this in terms of what we need as far as is concerned. But I can just say that there are many people who have actually set up their offices in the IFSC. So there have been legal firms, chartered accountant firms, fund administrators, service providers, which have already established their presence. The big four have either established or are in the process of establishing their presence. And I know Dipesh has been after me, but that decision, unfortunately, is still above my pay grade. So very quickly, the last point that I want to touch upon before I get into or I lay down my I finish my address is the tax incentives, and I'm sure that we've seen it, but let us refresh. There is section 80LA, which grants us a deduction of 100% of the profit of the IFSC unit for 10 consecutive years at the option out of 15 consecutive years. So for the first few years, if we are not profitable, if we think that our operations are not scaled up at a particular level, we choose to not claim the ATLA, that I would believe is perfectly fine, right? Again, as far as compliance is concerned, we need a Form 10 CCF. We've done that for clients. We will need to do that for ourselves from any other chartered accountant to certify that the deduction has been correctly claimed. MAT is lower if we are a company of 9% plus applicable surcharge. So is AMT. There's no STT or CTT, but if we do any trading on the IFSC exchanges, again, transactions in say bonds or specified GDRs or rupee denominated bonds, etc., are all exempt. This is again more from a client perspective than from us. And of course, there's a concessional tax and TDS rate of 4% on interest payments made to any non-resident by an Indian company on issue of any long-term bonds or rupee denominated bonds on or after 1st of April 2020, but before 31st June 2023, if these bonds are registered on an IFSC exchange. So again, this is one more opportunity if your client is looking for funding. And we've been in touch with a very big Indian bank recently who wants to set up or who wants to issue these bonds and list them on the IFSC exchanges. So it is an opportunity, and there is a lot of advisory around something like that in terms of the structure, in terms of what rate of interest to be charged, etc. So there is certainly, a possibility for a lot of things to be done. So with that, I think let me just end this presentation. Just let me, once again reiterate the fact that there is a lot that a chartered accountant can do sitting in GIFT, and it is a good opportunity. As I said, it is one of the things that one will have to look at, because this is the closest that we come to capital account convertibility. So there's a lot of activities that the IFSCA has permitted, and I would believe that one must make the most of it. Some of us probably came from different places to Bombay to settle down. Maybe it's time to look at settling down in some other place as well. With that, let me thank the organizers of the Borivali Central CP Study Circle for permitting me to come and speak about the opportunities in the IFSC. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, sir, for such a wonderful session.
I saw a raised hand, sir. Somebody had raised hand. So
there are no questions till now.
Okay.
That is by mistake. No questions as of now.
Sure.
That means, sir, everybody has understood what you have told today. Members, there is one important announcement. On 29th of August, that is coming Sunday, from 10, the timing is 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. It's a physical meeting, so request all the members to come with social distancing. Now I request our core committee member Jawad Wasa to propose a well-deserved vote of thanks to our last.
Thank you very much, Vijay Bhai, for giving me opportunity to thank the speaker of this session, CA Anish Thakur sir. On behalf of Borivali Central CP Study Circle, I propose hearty vote of thanks to CA Anish Thakur sir. He has given us the new dimension and opportunities available to CA in the field of GIFT City. He explained in detail various types of permissible ancillary services available at GIFT City in the field of legal, audit, management consulting, administrative, asset management services, and other allied services. Now, I propose on behalf of Borivali Central CP Study Circle, hearty vote of thanks to C. Anish Thakur sir, and request all the members to show their gratitude with loud of applause. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
With this, we'll end today's session, and we'll meet on 29th of August at Bhatiyawadi Hall. Till then, it's bye from team BCSE. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.